Okay, I'm watching a Corey Anton video, What Can One Mean by God? Uploaded December 12, 2011. I just got done watching a Daniel Dennett talk about the biology of religion that I thought was very wonderful. And I think it might have been called A Brief Natural History of Religion. No, that was Corey's talk. Dennett's talk was, Is religion man-made? How did religion start? And it was really, really fun for me to watch Dennett go through these ideas as being sort of parasitic in a way, or symbiotic perhaps. So in Corey's talk, What Can One Mean by God? He's asking a question, what does the word mean? Or what does one mean when one uses the word? What would I mean when I use the word? And that's a really great question. I think for me it probably varies with the context. So there would be a lot of connotations. I'm not sure if there's any denotation, but some of the connotations, there would be a creator, some kind of intelligence, will, and I'd end up moving towards a Hindu concept or idea of self with a capital S. But a lot of times it would be Jehovah, the God of Abraham, the one that said, I am going to do these things, stand by and prepare to be amazed. And then over the course of 2,000, 4,000 years, unfolding in history, and now there is this God of Christianity and Islam basically having taken over the world. And now as that God is being diminished by science and pushed into the gaps, the connotations of God change in my head. So God is a funny idea, that it could mean one thing and then could mean another thing. Okay, so about 3.5 minutes into Corey's talk, he asks, could consciousness have not been? And that's a funny hypothetical. Does consciousness even exist? It's a word. It is, assuming that we are conscious. Consciousness could be another critter of language, an artifact. So it's another word, kind of like God, that once it's reified, it might take on all sorts of permutations and combinations of meaning. Could awareness have not been? Could awakeness have not been? If there was no sleeping-waking cycle, then yeah, a rock maybe expands and contracts with temperature. I wouldn't say it's more or less awake, but I might. That would push the meaning probably off the scale. Awareness, if there were organisms, can an organism not be aware in some sense? Well, yeah, from a purely physicalist, materialist point of view, it's all just a bunch of atoms banging around, electrochemistry, and there is no awareness. Awareness is a word that it means something, but it doesn't really mean anything. In Dennett's talk, he began with saying something about how meaning evolved or emerged out of an intrinsic meaninglessness. I probably would not want to say that, although it's tempting at times to say sound comes out of silence and returns to silence, so silence is the basis of sound, meaninglessness is the basis of meaning. But I would rather say that no, they arise together, that meaninglessness and meaning or meaningfulness both arise together, that these are projections onto a perception. They're words. If a tree falls and there's no one around, does it make any motion in the air? Do the branches make any, I don't want to say sound, but do they crackle in some way? If it hits the ground, is there a motion of the earth? What is the sound of the word sound when the word sound is not spoken? What is the sound of any words when the words are not spoken? What does that even mean? Now, listening to Corey at about 4 minutes in, he reminds me of the fantastic unusualness, the remarkableness of what I would take to be reality. If I look at a bird or a leaf or anything, it's so astonishing to me that I want to say, what is it? How is it? Where is it? And all these interrogative pronouns come out of my mouth, and then I go chastening after a what, a how, a where. It's a funny kind of a quest. It's much easier to just be and not ask any questions. But it's not nearly as much fun. Listening to Corey talk, I'm brought back in a Mobius way to what does one mean by God, or what can one mean by God. As an instance of the universe, one could say in some ways that one is God. One is the universe. The problem with our explanations is that they fail to reach. With reality humming along and vibrating at a fantastic rate of speed, brains assemble bits, data, information flowing in and through, and upon reflection, the explanations get a wee bit distorted. There is certainly a wonder, and then an explanation. There is awe, there is astonishment. To think that there is other, that could be what God is. God is the supreme other in some ways of thinking. Still listening to Corey talk about sentience and consciousness, sometimes I think about God as being other than or beyond sentience and consciousness, that all of our words would fail to even come close to describing what God is in all God's glory. Okay, Corey asks, why is there a religious experience? For me, the word religion means to retie the world together. And at first, it might appear as though, as a little kid, there is no retying the world together. The world is simply together. With language and questioning and interrogative pronouns, the world kind of gets fragmented. And so what religion does is it puts it back together again. So I would suspect that religion arises with language. Prior to there being words, there still might have been awe and wonder, but I don't think it would have been codified as a religion even within one's own being or spirit without language and words. I could be wrong. Along around 9.5 minutes into his talk, Corey talks about prayer. And I think he's describing in terms of a rose blooming, prayer being something like that. I think that would be more like praise, that when people praise God, it's a little bit different from prayer. The way I think of prayer as supplication or intercession, requesting something, that would be different from the rose blooming. And I'm not a real praiseworthy guy. Every so often I celebrate life and am happy to be here. But generally speaking, prayer would be something different for me. Hope would be closely aligned with prayer. Praise would be more like a rose blooming, just being thanksgiving. As Corey nears the completion of his talk and defines God in a very unusual way, I'm struck with a strange kind of a realization. He seems to buy into ideas of time and evolution and emergence. So that would seem to be his axiomatic given, even though he wants to blend it with orderliness or spirituality or mystery or inevitabilities, almost like a teleological sort of a process. I don't think that's necessarily the case at all. In the future, there may cycle around to be an explanation along the lines of consciousness or awareness as being eternally present. And what appears as being time, space, emergence, all of those perceptions arises out of vibrations of consciousness. So it sort of flips the physical materialist view on its head. It would be the flip side of the coin, the other side of that coin, that we are conscious, and as conscious beings, in an effort to explain how we got to be this way, we invoke all these scientific modalities and end up with a fantastic story arising out of consciousness. But in that sense, the consciousness is as the silence behind the sound. The consciousness is the backdrop, is the wu, the non-being that is the ground of being. In that sense, it is God. He asks, why is that which is finite self-aware? Well, an answer could be, we are not finite. And so, similar question, why would that which is infinite be self-aware? Self-awareness and unawareness arise mutually, just as finitude and infinitude arise mutually. So what Corey is doing essentially is carving this uncarved block and then proceeding to chase his tail. I'm not sure if love arises out of religious sentiment. It might be the other way around. That people feel love for their children, their parents, their family, the world, and it's out of this love that arises religion and a sense of otherness as being all love, from which God arises. So a great connotation, if not denotation, of God is, well, God is love. God is a spirit. One of the ones I like the best, though, is God is a word. Words aren't just hot air, as Chuang-Tzu says. There is a context, and there are semantics, and so need be, they are taken. And if the words have communicated anything, so much the better.